Tonight, a horrifying escalation in this already horrendous story. Investigators now saying that teenager Celeste Rivas, that her body was found partially frozen, possibly refrigerated, potentially even decapitated before being moved into the frunk of that Tesla, and that David, the singer, did not act alone. A second suspect has reportedly now been identified, and the condition of Celeste remains are so degraded, it may mean police can never determine how she died. STS Nation, this may quickly be becoming one of the more dark stories that we have ever covered here.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is Thanksgiving week. This is the global phenomenon that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. And just so you know, we've got shows for you every day of the week coming up. So, holidays are a rough period of time. Some people prefer to spend them alone, but you're never alone with Surviving the Survivor. We will have something put out every day of the week this week, Monday through Friday. And that includes Thanksgiving Day. And that includes another video later tonight on the situation unfolding with 18-year-old Anna Kempner, who was found aboard a Carnival cruise ship in the port of Miami, which is another really disturbing and distressing story. First up with best guest today as we dig in to the latest with Celeste Rivas Hernandez and the accused, David the singer. Here is Dr. Detective Troy Looney, active Akron, Ohio PD. Not every day you get a doctor detective, and definitely not every day you get an active detective. They usually come on once they're retired, making tens of millions with their other 37 businesses that every law enforcement guy I know has. So these guys get the last laugh. They retire after 20, 25 years, and then they start to make bank. Next up, John Day, crowd favorite. Love the name, too. If my name was John Day or Joel Day, I would have replaced David Muir. But I'm Waldman. It never happened. But John Day, you're the man. Criminal defense attorney out of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And a warm STS welcome for first-time best guest, Colin Schmidt. He is retired FBI out of the Los Angeles field office covering Riverside and San Bernardino counties where this all happened. And Colin, I'll start with this. There is breaking news tonight in this case that I want to talk about. This is now being reported by KABC Los Angeles. A court-ordered security hold was placed on this case, the David Link case of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, meaning no records or details associated with the case can be released. And that hold is ongoing. Again, this is according to multiple sources reporting to KABC News. I mean, how unusual is this? I don't recall a medical examiner coming out and saying, and now the chief said some stuff I'll get to in a minute, but I don't remember as a reporter hearing a medical examiner's office having their case put on a security hold. What's happening here, do you think?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I really do appreciate being with this esteemed group of knowledgeable people about true crime. Secondly, in terms of that hold, and of course we're all speculating, but it sounds to me like the robbery homicide detectives in LAPD are getting a little frustrated with all the media attention with this case and all the leaks. So they appear to be starting to take efforts or steps to kind of lock it down, because there's still quite a bit of work to be done here, especially if it is true that there is other people involved in this case in terms of what happened to her.
Yeah, and Colin, just so people know, I think primarily you covered, and look at this, what a treat. UK retired homicide detective Nina Hobson has joined the fray here, and we'll get her in the mix. Nina also now is based out of Los Angeles, so we are all here Steve Cohen told me we might get Nina, and here she is. So we've got an extra large panel for the extra long holiday weekend. Colin, so you were in the LA field office, really covering Riverside and San Bernardino counties, primarily doing, I think, a lot of financial crimes. But what's it like to work? It's New York and LA, the two biggest. I mean, covering Los Angeles has got to be a task in and of itself.
Well, out in my area where I was primarily assigned for the last 18 years of my career, it's kind of an amalgamation of rural and urban environment. Like the city of Riverside and San Bernardino collectively have about 700,000 people. But when you get down to Lake Elsinore, where this happened, it starts to get rural, but there's major interstates all crisscrossing the territory. So you go quickly from an urban area to a rural area and back to an urban area. And there is a lot of acreage out in Riverside, San Bernardino. In fact, that area, it's called the Inland Empire. If it was its own state, it would be, I think, the 14th or 15th biggest in the country. So in cases of like this nature, there's always going to be a lot of resources put towards it because there's just a lot of territory to cover.
To make it easy for myself, I'll just go in reverse here. So Nina Hobson, welcome to the show. Always awesome to have you. The latest news, and I don't know that you know this because this just broke, and it's according to KABC, that there's been a security hold placed on this case. Essentially, the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division telling the medical examiner, don't release anything publicly. We're on this case. They're sealing it shut. Now, the chief medical examiner is a person named Dr. Odi Ukpo, and he is quoted by KABC as saying the hold is, and I quote here, virtually unheard of in other counties, and that it is, quote unquote, not been proven to improve outcomes in the legal system. Nina, what do you think of the fact that essentially the LAPD is clamping down on their own medical examiner's office, saying, don't release anything, no tox reports, nothing on those computers. We want this essentially sealed.
Yay. Fantastic. I've spoken before about how sometimes, things get in the media and they get leaked, and it doesn't help. If it's controlled and it's what the police need to be out there, it can absolutely help. But yeah, please, let's do what the police need us to do at this point. Obviously, this case is huge. It's got a celebrity element to it. It's horrendous what's happened. So if the police are saying, let's keep our mouth shut and let us do our job, then let's all keep our mouth shut and let them do their job.
Well said. And, when you talk to law enforcement, retired or active, and Phil Waters comes to mind, the legendary Houston homicide detective who's on our show. He does not give, pardon my French, a crap about the media, which is great. I mean, I'm former media, but that's how he sees it. And that's how Nina sees it, because they've got to get their work done and they want to protect their case. And I see both sides, but that doesn't mean that the media is going to stop doing its job. And obviously KABC has some really good sources on this case, and they're the ones reporting that this basically has been put on lockdown. Now, John Day, you're different than the other guests in that you are the attorney that would represent someone potentially like David, who has been apparently or reportedly looked at as a suspect, along with a second unidentified person. What do you make of this hold? Is that do you appreciate it? Is that something you're in favor of?
Oh, I mean, I'm totally in favor of it if it helps advance the case. I mean, from a defense lawyer perspective, it's what's going to happen is going to happen. But clearly, there's something that the case agent doesn't want out there. And again, what crime are we talking about yet? I mean, there's still no there's still no announcement of this as a homicide. It could be theoretically, what if it was an overdose death and there were charges of mishandling a corpse and, charges that are much less serious than homicide? So we don't know a lot, obviously, at this point, but clearly there's something in the OMI or the medical investigator, the coroner's findings that the case agent doesn't want out there, obviously, because there could be some information if it is a homicide versus, say, mistreatment of a body, something like that. There's something out there that they don't want released. And sure, that's not unreasonable in a case like this, especially, since there's no the clear definition of what happened to this poor young woman. So there's a lot we don't know, but I don't see any real problem with this. I know the medical examiner was saying, we don't agree with this. We try to be transparent, but that's sometimes those two entities, law enforcement and the coroner, are going to clash like this. It's kind of an interesting development.
Yeah, and by the way, we've had Steve Fisher on, who's the private investigator for the quote-unquote mansion owner in the Hollywood Hills that was renting his home out to David. And Steve is publicly saying now that he's not going to speak about the case anymore because his words are getting twisted up by some other media outlets. And so he's kind of backed away from the case. And I've seen this happen before. And, I respect his desire to not want to talk, and we will eventually, I'm sure he will, and he even mentioned that he will start at some point to speak about the case, but for now he's staying mum as well. So Dr. Detective Troy Looney, now we're getting a little more information about this hold by the LAPD. They had initially asked for this hold on September 15th, but at that time it was denied, and the citation for that was insufficient justification to warrant the hold. That was the legal citation. David is now considered a suspect in this case, and the manner of death remains undetermined, and it might for a very long time. We'll get to that in a minute, but back to this. Have you ever gone to your medical examiner's office and said, hold this, security wise, don't release details?
So again, working several cases, I've had cases that have been sealed by the judge or by the court. So again, for obvious reasons, there's public records requests and so forth. And being that it's such a high profile case, I'm not surprised that I'm kind of surprised it didn't take place a lot sooner, based upon the amount of coverage and everything. So again, nothing against media, but yeah, we really have to, as we've always said, protect the integrity of the case and kind of reel things in. So this is a real crucial time now. The fact that they even said there's a second person of interest is still somewhat kind of being a little more transparent, but you still have to really be careful at this point in time.
Yeah. Colin, to you, I saw a couple of comments saying, I hope the FBI gets involved. Now we're covering another case in Central California. Melody Buzzard is missing 9-year-old girl, and there the mother reportedly took her across state lines. So the FBI is involved. Do you know if the FBI is involved with this, or should they be, or will they be?
I don't know. I don't have any inside information on that. And frankly, the LAPD robbery homicide group's amongst the best in the world. So if they do bring in the FBI, it's because there's some sort of interstate or foreign nexus where there's areas that they just can't get to because their responsibility is the city of Los Angeles. And or if there's some technical expertise that they don't have, they may bring in the FBI. But the crux or the meat of the investigation is going to be done by LAPD, and I'm sure they're going to do a fantastic job.
By the way, Carm and I, the COE, posted a little short video. It was the Miami Book Fair. It was awesome. We had a crazily large, unexpected showing. I told Carm we were going to have one person at the Miami Book Fair, and we had a packed room full of people. And then it was an interesting thing. Carm had an interesting moment where she was convinced that my grandmother is my mother-in-law, and we went back and forth, and the room became very concerned. And guess what? Right after the talk, Carm understood she was having a momentary senior moment, and was right back with us. And it wouldn't be Surviving the Survivor without a moment like that. So it was both sort of humorous, disturbing, and all those things at once. But Carm got through it, signed a lot of books. Carm had her author tag, and it was great. The COE has put up a short video, and huge thanks to everybody who showed up for that. John Day is going to turn red once again. Is John a member of STS Singles? It usually does happen. I think he's got the Harrison Ford vibes going, but that's still up for debate. Nina Hobson, to you. Now, Fox LA is reporting, we're getting all the different media outlets reporting different things. This is really kind of the headline grabber. And it's very disturbing, I might add. Celeste, that her body was apparently found partially frozen when discovered. So this is a very disturbing revelation, and most people are shaking their heads going, what is going on here? She was found in the frunk of a Tesla in August or September in Los Angeles. How is this possible? Apparently there's some large freezer in this mansion that David was renting, but what does this do, I guess, to the dynamics of the investigation? Now finding this piece of information out, Nina, that her body was reportedly, again, partially frozen in there.
Yeah, and we go back to the media chain. So that's coming out in the media. And maybe that's one of the reasons that we're not being given information by the police, because right now we don't know how or what it is the cause of death. And that may be crucial to the actual proving of a case and getting the right person locked up for this. So I think that until it's, given by the correct people, by the police, I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of things that come out that, as we know, that they aren't necessarily the right things. So if that is the case, obviously incredibly disturbing. Whatever's happened here is incredibly disturbing. We have yet again a young lady who is no longer with us. So if the fine detail that comes out is going to be disturbing, but let's wait and see what the correct detail is before we make any further assumptions of what's happened here, because we now know, we're closing it down as the police, which everyone is saying is rare. So there's a reason, and I work with facts and evidence, so I want to see what they are, as opposed to what any media, as much as I love the media, Joel, and I appreciate everything you do, when I'm getting the right person sent to prison for the right reasons, not always the favorite person.
Yeah, and no offense taken there. I mean, John Day, forget the legal question. Are you surprised that in 2025, this case that has got such a heavy media spotlight, that there's so much that's kind of hazy about the details? We hear possibly frozen, we hear possibly dismembered, and we'll get to that in a moment, but it just seems now this hold. I mean, are you surprised that more hasn't leaked out more fluidly, I guess?
Not surprised. I mean, what surprises me, going back to the start, countless cases homicide cases I've prosecuted and defended. And the thing I still don't understand is, whoever these people are who are responsible, a body in a car is always going to be discovered one way or the other. I mean, the idea that somehow you are engaging in some kind of illegal activity, whether this was a homicide or a case where somebody died and they're trying to cover that up through, mistreatment of a corpse, whatever the level of crime there is here, I mean, that's always going to be something that ultimately someone's going to find. And I just go back to, what was going on here? Who are these people, and why did they think this was, the appropriate way to do whatever horrible thing they were doing? But I mean, a body in a car, it's going to be found out ultimately one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You're never getting away with a body in the frunk. So that's whoever put her there, and reportedly it's David and another suspect. 100% they're finding her. A lot of people are saying to me, well, she's not 15, she's 14, and that's correct. She's listed as 15 because technically that was her age when found. But this is a 14-year-old girl, possibly younger even, because now the missing report goes back to April 2024. We'll get to the timeline in a minute. But Troy Looney, the question was just posed in chat. What if the cause and manner of death remains undetermined for eternity because they just can't figure it out. What do you do as investigators?
So, Joel, that's where everything else comes in or factors in. The other evidence, whether it's circumstantial, everything they've been gathering, every witness statement, every person they've talked to, everything they can kind of compile. So again, it would be contingent upon what kind of charges, if any, take place or happen, people that are held accountable. So that's all contingent upon the totality of what they have discovered or seized in terms of evidence and what they can prove. I guess essentially it's always about what we can prove.
Yeah, and Troy, I just want you to comment on this partially frozen body that's discovered. Again, apparently there is or was a large, meat type freezer in this mansion. Is it just sort of obvious that she was at some point close to when the body is found, was moved from this freezer? I mean, I can't imagine staying in that state too long in the California sun, right?
So again, contingent upon, we know how she was found, but where did this all take place? Was she placed in a freezer at some point in time? Obviously that being in California, I've never been, but I imagine the temperatures there, it's more on the warmer side, obviously. So again, that's I do know maybe they were trying to conceal her, obviously, or maybe the stages of decomp to slow the process down. I've had a body found in a vehicle, but it was by fire. It was damaged by fire. And that my case was actually overdose, and then they set the whole car on fire. But I've never had a frozen victim found in a trunk, not yet. So
I'm thinking the frunk would work as a cooler almost. I don't know about that. I think in the heat, it basically is more of an oven than a cooler. But someone correct me if I'm wrong about that. Colin is shaking his head yes. So Colin, to you, one of the other disturbing things here, and the New York Post is reporting this amongst several other media outlets. The body not only is said to have been partially frozen, but that Celeste was decapitated. And again, investigators are fearing the worst in terms of never being able to determine cause of death here. If this is in fact true, it's a big if, but again, these are big media outlets, and it sounds like there's some channeling of information going on between at least the medical examiner's office and the media. And I'm sure somewhere in LAPD they're getting some information. But what would this say to you if, in fact, there was some sort of decapitation in this process?
Well, first of all, I want to make the point that this is still a child. I mean, she's 13 when she went missing, and it's just an absolute tragedy that this was done to her. Whether it was done to her corpse or she was killed, we just don't know. But in terms of a decapitation, that would tell me there was some sort of emotional reason for doing that to the body. It wasn't just thrown over on the side of the street. Once you start doing some sort of things to the body itself, that tells me that there's some sort of connection between the person doing these things and the body itself. And there had to be some very dark reason to decapitate this child's body. So once again, it's all speculation. We just don't know what the true story is until all the facts come out. But it's just such a terrible tragedy that this happened, and then the way she was found.
Yeah. Nina, you know a bit about this because Nina focuses a lot of her work on human and sex trafficking. But someone is saying, listen, David is an artist. We don't know much about him, but there's photos on Instagram. I don't think they're still there, or maybe they are, of him in bloodstained shirt. He's got a song called Romantic Homicide. Any indication here, or just too tough to tell, if there's some sort of, cult-ish link or potential to this crime?
No, I mean, for me, again, it's too early. And the pictures with the blood-stained shirt, what's real on Instagram half the time isn't really real. I know from calling someone I got told and just got married, and that wasn't true. But I think, you know, anything is possible at this point. And I think when Colin uses the word child, it makes you shiver, because she's such a young girl. Who knows whether it's somebody who's connected to a cult? Who knows whether cutting the body up was a way of trying to stop the detection, putting it in a freezer, stop the detection, prolong things? Why would it then be put in a car? Why would you not leave it in a freezer? There's so many questions that aren't yet answered. And I think anyone making speculation about who, what, where, at this point, it's too early to say, certainly from a professional standpoint.
Yeah, a lot of people are suggesting maybe David was framed here. I'll come back and I'll take a note on that, and we can discuss that a little bit. But John Day, if you know, down the road, the prosecution alleges that the body was intentionally frozen for some reason, perhaps to obstruct the investigation, what does that do to potential charges? Does it turn it into some sort of tampering with a corpse, abuse of a corpse? Does it up the ante in any way, legally speaking?
Yeah, it does. I mean, again, what's the underlying crime? Is it a homicide, or is it a death? Some accidental death, or, you know, again, too early. We don't know, but certainly somebody could be charged with tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse. And that's just apart from whether law enforcement can establish whether or not this was a homicide, whether this was a murder. If it was an accidental death, I mean, again, we don't know. Tragic, this young kid. If it was an accidental death and somebody panics and decides to make some bad choices in terms of trying to hide the evidence, that's one thing. I mean, tampering with evidence, felonies, abuse of a corpse, things like that. It's not, but again, that's not really as serious as an intentional homicide or some type of a manslaughter charge. So too early to know, but there's scenarios on both sides of this. You can see, I've had cases where people, and I've prosecuted them and defended them, where people have, there's been an accidental death and people make stupid choices and they try to hide it. That's one thing. Very different from a homicide. And again, we don't know yet.
Yeah. And again, that amazes me, I guess, this far into it. Now, from an investigative standpoint, we're only talking basically beginning of September. So it's November 24th today. It's not that much time if you ask investigators, but it feels like an eternity. That's like when I tell my kid, it's 5 days till we go away for Thanksgiving. And he's like, that's like a year and a half to him. So it's kind of relative. But this is, thank you to Rosemary Jarvis, just giving us a super sticker. I appreciate that. So Celeste Rivas Hernandez, Dr. Detective, this is a very rough timeline, but she's reported missing April 2024. Last called home May 2024, and I'll have Colin and Nina respond to this timeline as well. Found in the trunk of David's Tesla on September 8th, 2025. That's just this past September. Now, remains found inside a bag, dismembered and partially frozen. David's tour is canceled on September 20th. David named a suspect, although I got to say, November 18th, we got that suspect information, as far as I know, from media, and still haven't heard from LAPD robbery homicide. So there is a part of me, we can go back and play this tape if I'm ever right, that's, reluctant to believe it. And also this notion of a second suspect, that is coming from media outlets basically reporting news from within LA's robbery homicide. But we have not heard a lick of anything from LAPD on this in basically since their last press release, which was a long time ago. But Dr. Detective, how often are you reworking this timeline and looking at this timeline? And I'll add the caveat that Steve Fisher, the private eye, he's publicly said that he believes she could have been dead for months and months earlier.
Again, so we're always looking at the evidence. We allow the evidence to lead us in the direction it's taking us. And if we have to go back and conduct other interviews, or we find new evidence that's introduced, new witnesses that's introduced, it can change factors in the timeline. Of course, again, every investigator, and John can attest to it also, this is why we have to keep things kind of close to ourselves, law enforcement speaking, close to, ourselves, to protect integrity, because one detail like that can kind of stir things or create a situation where you have to, I guess, backtrack again and potentially just, consider, how much is out there. So this is why they're reeling things in now, and it should have been done before, as much as they can. Obviously, media has the lay of the land to say what they want, speculate, just like a lot of us are doing as well. But just looking at it from that side, it's really timeline can change. I mean, that can change based upon what evidence we discover.
Yeah. Court lurker in the chat saying it's been 16 months between last time she basically talked to home and found in the frunk. And again, Steve Fisher, very public about saying that he believes that Celeste Rivas was dead much longer than people are letting on. Colin, when you look at this timeline, what goes through your mind? And is this the type of thing that if you're working a case like this, that you're obviously taking a close look at this every day and wondering, do I need to readjust this?
Well, it coming right back to the timeline that's the most important part of the investigation, because that really kind of lends context to every step of this case. And this timeline goes all the way back to when he met her. She was a minor. I mean, she's reportedly 13 and he was an adult. So if there was a physical relationship between the two, then you have you're starting right off a statutory rape. And then as they go through the robbery, homicide is going to fill in this timeline with all the techniques they have, the cell phones, the video, the interviews, and most importantly, that medical examiner report. But like to answer your question, looking at this timeline, that what we have just based from scattered media reports, it doesn't look good for this guy. And it looks like LAPD is really starting to narrow in on what they need to do.
Yeah, and again, Colin said this, and it is true. Robbery, homicide, LAPD, one of the best. I mean, after all, Bosch was LAPD robbery, homicide. If you hadn't seen the show, it's a great show. Nina, if she was partially frozen from Janet True, could she have been frozen for months and then put in a car when he was on tour? I know this is pure speculation, but it goes back to the timeline and the fact that what we know and what we're told, that she's found on September 8th, I believe, or right around there, might be the time that she was found, but potentially dead much longer. I mean, how critical is it to sort of hone in on that?
Yeah, I mean, what the police will be doing is looking, when was she last seen? Who was she last seen with? We have that she last called home in May. But then they're going to really target on who has seen her since then. And when did he start being publicly seen with her? And when was he publicly not seen with her? Because that could mean that she died, around the same time that she last called home. And of course, if she was placed in a freezer, she could be placed in a freezer for months and months, and for whatever reason, and I don't know, maybe he was giving up the property that he was in, if it's him. And maybe there was a reason if she was in a freezer, which honestly, it just makes me feel sick just even having to say those words. But then he needed to move her. And, the homeowner who hired a PI, what was that really about, other than probably to protect and find out maybe this property was used for these purposes? And it's so sad. It's so sad that this young girl has been missing for so long, and no one's really done anything about it, and I mean that from a authority, and I mean that from a family perspective. This young girl is kind of been lost, and she's now been found, sadly. And it could have been months and months ago that she was killed. If she was killed. If you ask me, and I'm not a betting person, she was killed.
Interesting. So listen, in the chat, I just saw that there's a new press release from LA PD right here from Honey in the Rock, I think it is. Where did I just do that? Put that right there. If you could email that to me, if someone has it, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. But I'm looking at Twitter, and LAPD captain, this is happening right now, everybody. LAPD captain and commanding officer of Robbery Homicide Division, a guy named Scott Williams with 1T in Scott, tells People Magazine exclusively that Rivas Hernandez, Celeste, was not frozen and was not decapitated, as previously reported by local media. The direct quote is, Celeste's body was not frozen. She was not decapitated. The whole frozen thing doesn't even make sense. Her body was in the car for weeks. He goes on, even if she had been frozen solid when she was put in the car, which there's no evidence to suggest she was, 5 or more weeks in the trunk of a car in sweltering heat in the middle of summer would not have resulted in a partially frozen body being discovered on September 8th. That is what this captain of the Robbery Homicide Division has to say. I'd like everyone's response. So, Colin, to you first. This is now Scott Williams, again, the captain of the Robbery Homicide Division that's investigating this. The commanding officer telling people the body was not partially frozen and not decapitated, debunking what the media has been reporting. How significant is this that he's speaking out? This just crossed the wires like in the last 30 minutes or so.
I think his management is telling him to get out there and start tamping down in this media frenzy, because the rumors are starting to overcome their investigation and the speculation. There's still work to be done on this case. And I think all of the speculation and all the TMZ and everybody is kind of digging in. That's going to start, if it hasn't already, interfering with their investigation. And then there was one other point that I saw in some media, once again, media reporting about a late night trip to Santa Barbara. And so that's an interesting twist to this story as well. Apparently that happened in the spring. But the point is that I think LAPD is really trying to keep control of this because it's starting to get out of control.
Nina, I mean, to Colin's point, it looks like either it's damage control or, Troy's point, being done a little bit too late. But now, basically, unintentionally or intentionally, the media has forced the LAPD robbery homicide's hand with the commanding officer, Scott Williams, now speaking out. And again, he says Celeste's body was not frozen. She was not decapitated. The whole frozen thing doesn't even make sense. Her body was in the car 4 weeks. Is this damage control? Is it too late to try to get ahead of the story here? How do you read what's going on in the news right now at this very moment?
I don't know if it's damage control or whether he's just trying to calm the situation, as we just said, so that they can do their investigation. But let's be honest, these things have already been put out there. People will still be saying, oh, it's the body that was frozen. It's already out there. So I kind of feel that this is a bit late. And I'm not really sure what that's going to achieve. So the people on this panel, we're all kind of, some of us more than others, we're in this industry and we understand what he's saying. And I sit here and say, well, that's correct then, because this is the chief of police who's saying it. Other people will totally ignore it. So I think it's too late for that to happen, because the media will probably go even more crazy right now. Let's be honest, that's how they work sometimes.
100% agree with you. Just to be clear, he's not the chief, but the commanding officer. But he is basically the chief.
Sorry,
no
ranking systems work over here. Well, here's a boss. He's the boss, right?
He's the big boss. He's the man in charge of this unit for sure. Troy Looney, you're still active and you've covered some really big cases, including an arson that you talked to me about on our show that ended up killing 9 people, I believe. In this situation, pull back the curtain. What do you think's going on? Why is the commanding officer for robbery homicide, Scott Williams, all of a sudden on the Monday of Thanksgiving, while we're broadcasting this show live, coming out and saying, even if she had been frozen solid when she was put in the car, which there's no evidence to suggest she was, 5 or more weeks in the trunk of a car in sweltering heat in the middle of summer would not have resulted in a partially frozen body being discovered on September 8th. He's basically saying the media is full of it. But what is happening behind the scenes, do you think?
So behind the scenes, they're having a huge discussion about this, and frankly, I think they're a little bit pissed about what's taking place. I mean, you put that information out there, as I've said before, Nina said before, I'm sure Colin can attest to, and John. Again, back to the integrity of the case. When you have things that are put out there, like the timelines of this, or it's much larger, and I know who went in the car, and nothing against Steve and the PI and all, in the media. But again, we only get one chance to do it right. So when you have things out there, and obviously we're talking about potential suspects that are watching all of this also. So, you don't want these people comfortable. We want them to make mistakes so we can discover and find those facts. So yeah, I'm sure they felt they had to come out and say, enough is enough with that. If that's not the case, we have to at least address that. And now we're locking things down. So we'll get probably less information, rather than more transparency.
Yeah, for sure. John Day, to you, one of the interesting things has been the incredible silence from this, rising star who I once called a rap star, then R&B, I was told. Now he's indie rock, an indie rock guy. Now there's also reportedly second suspect. We don't know if that is accurate because it appears this partially frozen thing is inaccurate. But from the work of the defense attorney who is representing David, is he doing the right thing? Just having him on complete lockdown, shut down. No one's heard from him. No one's seen from him. We don't even know where he is necessarily.
Yeah, and I know it's it's tough when you're dealing with a case like this, a horrible ending for this, obviously a sweet young girl. But the reality is that this guy David he's hired one of the best defense lawyers in Southern California. It's someone who knows what they're doing. The message, the order from the defense team is, we're locking you down. You're not saying anything. You're being watched. Every move you make is being watched. Every communication you're engaged in. So from that perspective, you're just trying to, it's sort of the opposite, but the same goal as law enforcement, trying to shut down information that's going out. And from the defense perspective, you don't know what you don't know. You can guess some things, but until there's more information, you've got to have a complete lockdown on your client. It doesn't always work. We've seen plenty of instances where there's some client control issues. Obviously, there's not enough information for the defense team to know what's going on. But getting back to something that Troy was saying, I mean, I've actually, there are instances where law enforcement, in a very strategic way, lets information out because they have a goal in mind of, trying to smoke out somebody or make somebody make a move that's going to be, beneficial to the investigation. So there are times when there's a strategic reason for getting out information, maybe not all the information, maybe bits and pieces, but I think we can't discount the idea that somebody may have had an idea that we want something to be out there to see if we get some kind of a result from it. So, I mean, that may not be the case here, but there have been plenty of times where it's a good law enforcement technique to not be totally transparent, but be a little transparent. And I've seen good results from the prosecution side, from the defense side, maybe not such good results.
And that's an interesting distinction that, they might want to release a little bit of some things, but not others. But Colin, I'm assuming that if the commanding officer, this guy, Scott Williams, just came out publicly and talks to People magazine and says her body was not frozen, not partially frozen, and not decapitated, there's, in my opinion, there's next to no chance that we're going to find out that was the case, right? I mean, this guy would look awful and would have egg on his face. So what about that? I mean, should we take it now as sort of gospel in this case that is not the case? But what's interesting is what he didn't address was that David is a suspect, and he didn't address the second suspect.
The short answer is yes. That is gospel. What he said is true because he said it, and he's got the most credibility of anybody that's ever been involved in this case thus far because he's there and he's the supervisor of their investigation. So it's obvious that he's trying to tamp down all of these wild conspiracy theories before this, and frankly, it's already got out of control. And he's also trying to manage his own personnel, because they're probably looking at this going, boss, this is out of control. Can you do something? Can you say something? Can we get back to work? So I think the LAPD is handling this correctly. And the last point I want to make is LAPD is very, very experienced with these large, high media cases, probably the most experienced in the world. So frankly, they know what they're doing, and they're also working in very close coordination with the LA DA's office, who has a great district attorney right now that's also coordinating this information. And they're not going to let anything out of their office, because if they do, whoever does it's not going to have a job.
Yeah. Not to get too like macabre on everybody, but I was thinking, well, if this partially frozen thing was true, which now the commanding officer during this show has come out and said is not true, I was thinking maybe that's the reason that the people who were checking, like the parking enforcement people, weren't smelling the decomposition, because maybe the frozenness of it was masking that smell. Because if you recall, they marked the car, but they never opened the frunk till they were ready in the tow yard, and that's when they discovered this body. But again, the commanding officer now saying that there was no frozen body. So that brings me back to the, why wasn't this body discovered earlier from just the smell alone, without getting too gross about it? But Nina Hobson, you are extremely interested in human sex trafficking. We're talking about a young girl here. Let's call her what she is. 14 years old, likely, when she was killed. Technically 15 when she was discovered. Why was she with this guy in the first place? Does that just take a back seat now? Is that something that they're going to look at on the back end of this investigation, or are they investigating that simultaneously with this hideous crime?
Right now, they're looking at what the crime is, and I think that is a point, that there hasn't been anything that is the crime. But whether you're an experienced detective or FBI, you kind of know what the crime is going to be. But all of that's going to be looked at. Why is this young girl, she's a child when all said and done? Why was she, how long? All of that's going to be looked into. And then it's going to be looked into with the suspect. What are the connections with any other children? And I'm going to keep using that word, children, because we need to know if there's anything else that comes to light from this person, this suspect, if he's a suspect. And you know what? I don't even know whether the police are going to announce that he is a suspect until they have arrested him, if that's what they choose to do. So yeah, everything, all of that, his whole background, if he's a suspect, every single part of him, and particularly every single part of him since the dates on that timeline, will be being looked at and really taken apart right now.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering to myself if maybe the commanding officer is not doing it intentionally, but Troy, he's essentially saying that she was not found partially frozen. But then I see some comments in the chat which are interesting, which means that maybe she was still frozen, not just at the time that she was found, she wasn't frozen. So I would assume that investigators are looking at every angle. And if there was this freezer, as it has been reported, and not to like double down on the frozen fact, but just from the investigators' work, they're going to have to find out if she was frozen at some point. That will be something that they will certainly look at. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. Again, so this, we've all been waiting for the report from the Emmy's office, and their findings, whether there's a cause or whether it's conclusive or inconclusive, and that's taken the time it's taken. As we said before, they have to be meticulous about that, and if they can make determinations, they will. So now that this maybe report's coming closer to being delivered or has been delivered, again, we're assuming, but they really had to lock that report down, that information down. They had to contain and seal that, because they're going to look at that. And again, back to determining if there's a crime or what kind of crime, what elements exist. and then everything that ties in together. So all the details. I mean, but that's the ME's primary objective, to determine what happened to this body, what happened to this child. So again, I want to add to that. I appreciate Nina saying child, because that is the case. And I want everyone to think about the family, right? If this has been reported, she's frozen, she's decapitated, people are fascinated by true crime, but this is a child, this is a family, this is a community. All of us are impacted by that. So imagine hearing that from the parents, and then that's not the case. It's trauma. You're traumatizing them all over again, and her reputation and everything. So again, we have to kind of ease back, always consider that. So
yeah, and that's a great point, Troy, and very well taken and appreciated. And I'm coming to you, John, but ain't no hollow back, girl. Nina, why isn't her mother vocalizing and asking the public for help now that the family basically gets thrown under here? What a horrible case. I wonder why her mother, she has a father, by the way, who apparently went back to El Salvador. But Nina, can you just speak about, the parents in this case, why we might not be hearing from them? I know, for one, language might be a barrier. Two, fear might be a barrier. I don't want to bring politics into this, but we know what's going on with, I don't know if she's here illegally, but we know what's going on with immigration in the country. There might be a fear factor. What do you think could be happening here with the parents, and why we haven't really heard from them or any kind of pleas from them?
I think it's potentially true what you just said, Joel, with the factors that are in this, but we know that it was a dysfunctional relationship at times with this young lady and her family. And, we know that she left and came home and left and came home. And I think we don't know, sitting here, what the dynamics are. And again, we don't know what they've been told. We don't know who's liaising with them. They should have a liaison person from LAPD, and I'm sure that's happening behind the scenes. And maybe they're being advised to keep quiet too. So again, I second, this is somebody's child, regardless of what their relationship is, whether she was missing, coming back, whatever it might be. I'm fortunate because I have amazing children, grown now, as you all do, or Joel, I know you do. And this young lady didn't necessarily have that. And did that allow for her to be in the position she was in? Who knows? The guy's an adult, she's a child. I see it when I'm working in sex trafficking victims. We all can judge why they're in that situation, but they're not all as privileged as my children or Joel's children. And I think that, again, we have to respect what they're hearing. This is still their child.
Yeah, and in general, not all parents are created equal. And I'm not saying she doesn't have great parents. We just don't know. I do know that language is certainly one of the barriers here. That's for sure. But John Day, there's talk now about a second suspect, and it's also what this commanding officer for robbery homicide did not say live during this show to People Magazine. He did not deny a second suspect. He also did not deny or mention that David is not a suspect in this. If there is a second suspect, does the state's case become stronger, weaker? Is it tougher to put a case like that together? Is it a conspiracy charge if you're the defense attorney here, what are you doing? And you're representing David. What are you doing with the information that there's possibly a second person involved?
Well, you're doing the same. You're trying to investigate this case from the defense perspective, but remember, just sort of a global overall view of this thing. There are a lot of people, we know this, making money off of David, right? In this business, there are a lot of people hanging on. There was most likely some element of an entourage. There were no matter whether she was frozen or not, whether there was dismemberment or not, this was not a situation where there's only one person who knows what's going on. There are a lot of people clearly who have information, may have participated, maybe, and obviously law enforcement is chasing every single person who is probably profiting off of this guy's music career. And I think we understand that there's a lot of people who are around him. There are going to be people who were physically with him, and if whether or not he's a suspect, whatever he knows about this, ultimately people are going to talk. I mean, that's just how these cases are. And we've seen some pretty high profile cases involving people who are pretty powerful in the music business, and people talk, and that's how things get resolved. So if I'm the defense side on this one, I'm trying to shut down every single avenue, trying to find out what actually happened. And again, you don't know. It's too early. You may have some suspicions. You may have friendly relations with law enforcement who are giving you bits and pieces of information, but you may be in the dark as the rest of us are.
Yeah. Good point. And Colin, this is an interesting point right here. I'm late to the conversation from NSTKI. But does it seem to anyone like someone wanted her body to be found? And if you recall, John Day earlier in the show said if you put a body in the frunk of a Tesla or the trunk of a regular car, it will be found eventually. I mean, there's just no way for it to not be. They could have hidden her anywhere in the vast wilderness, and they parked a car in a neighborhood, presumably, Colin, with her body in the front trunk. What does that tell you? Does that give you, is that a clue, as you guys say in law enforcement?
Well, that's a great point, because it's Southern California. The body, it could have been hidden anywhere, and you have an ocean as well as lakes and rivers, and you put this out in the wilderness or in the desert out in Riverside County, and the animals or whatever are going to take care of the disposing the body for you. So that lends to the theory that it was a setup. But on the flip side, though, depending on who did this, it may have been a matter of somebody just not having very high functional thinking, and there was a bit of a panic. And then once they made their move, they couldn't go back and undo it. So time will tell, but that's a great point about the body being put right out on a busy street in Hollywood Hills and in the summer heat, because this September in Southern California was very hot.
We have the best guests in all of true crime. I say that proudly, not arrogantly. If you find a better panel than this, I'll give you your money back. And now we've got a new best guest in retired FBI special agent out of the LA field office in Colin Schmidt. Now, Nina Hobson, to you, former retired UK homicide detective. What investigative steps now do you prioritize now that there's quote unquote this second suspect? I mean, are you interviewing? Is it digital forensics? Is it tracking movement? Is it the Tesla itself and the cameras? How do you know what to prioritize and when?
Well, we obviously, as the public, we don't know what we don't know, as somebody's already said. So if they've got to find the cause of death, is really important, because cause of death will change the way that the investigation goes. Because if we're saying, it's a suicide, okay, so we've got to look at different crimes. So that's going to be a priority for the cops. Also, if they have suspects, then those two, and I say two, suspects are going to be so focused in on right now, because if that's the only suspects they have, we have to look at every single piece of evidence around them. We have to follow the timeline. And it's just really been well said. Like, this is not somebody who's on the up and up in the entertainment. And I've worked in entertainment for a while now. There's always somebody else around. That's what they thrive on as individuals, this constant telling people, people telling them how great they are and knowing things. And I also feel the same, that somebody who did this wasn't necessarily functioning correctly at the time it was done and left a body. And once you've gone down that road, you've gone down that road. And so I think the suspects will be the target right now. And we'll see whether that ever comes to fruition.
And John Day, if there is a second suspect, and again, the commanding officer didn't deny that, and we don't know who this person is. Now, David, as far as we know, is not cooperating. That's been reported. If you're David's criminal defense attorney and the other suspect is in fact genuine, there is a real second suspect. If that second suspect is speaking, does that change your, I don't know, your game plan as a defense attorney? What do you do if this other person is talking to police and your client isn't?
Well, you still don't know enough. I mean, you've got to wait to do an effective job. He's entitled to a defense. He's got a good defense lawyer now. But you don't know, what sort of deals are being made. You don't know who's working off charges. You don't know who's cooperating early on. I mean, is it a race to the police station to get in line to talk to the case agent to say, if you can get me a good deal, I've got some good information for you. So there's so much going on behind the scenes. It's not happening in a vacuum. I mean, things are happening. And if you are the lawyer for at least the guy right now who is the main target, you've got your own private investigators who are probably really good ex-law enforcement who have their own contacts with, LAPD's robbery homicide folks. So you're working the other side of it, trying to see what information is out there. And, again, you've got some, tools to work with if you're trying to mount an effective defense. But at the end of the day, it's still too early. You don't know enough. You're playing a waiting game like the rest of us are, really.
Yeah. Troy Looney, not to sound like like a former reporter for traditional media, but this guy comes out again, Scott Williams. I just looked at the comment he made one more time just to make sure I was right. He says Celeste's body was not frozen. She was not decapitated. The whole frozen thing doesn't even make sense. Her body was in the car for weeks. What he doesn't deny there is dismemberment. So it's possible that still, he did not come out and say she wasn't cut up. And I hate to be like that crass about it. So I assume that is still something that would have to be investigated. And how, I mean, besides the obvious, if the body is in that form of decomposition, I don't know, are they looking for serrated body parts? I mean, how do you go about and confirm the worst there?
Again, that all falls back to the medical examiner, their entire autopsy and their summation of what took place. So they've always looked at everything, potentially any potential trauma, any potential toxicology or potential substances, if at all. They're going to run that as a general practice. And again, yes, definitely if there's trauma or decomposition, so that takes a lot longer. Again, as they said, severe decomp was reported early on. So again, it all falls back to the Emmy and what they conclude. So yeah, and as far as the body in the car, maybe these people had intention to come back and move that. Of course, I'm speculating, but if they did, as the other people said, maybe they made a mistake or they didn't get a chance to, because one thing we do know about all suspects, they try to distance themselves from the crime or crime scene, right? Again, when you're high powered, you have the means and money to do things. So again, speculating, but just thoughts that come, to the table. And, as all investigators, you have to think about everything potentially, but you let the facts lead you. So, but you still have to consider everything's in play, right?
Yeah. And this is kind of gruesome, but I guess true, unless there are tool marks, it is decomposition. Colin, to you, just back to this timeline. Some people are speculating, and the media is too, that she died much sooner, almost potentially up to 17 months before discovery. And I don't know how that's necessarily true, because Steve Fisher himself has come out and said he saw her on video in at least January, February of 2025. So the 17 months doesn't make sense to me. But with that level of decomposition, what are the sort of the digital breadcrumbs that they're using? How much are they relying on this Tesla to piece together this this timeline?
Well, the biggest digital breadcrumb is that Tesla itself. It's a rolling supercomputer. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be so much data coming out of that car, depending upon what model it is. But even the older ones still have volumes and volumes of data, and LAPD is going to get it. I mean, there's cameras, there's audio, I mean, there's even sensors to see how much you weigh and how many people are in the car and when they were in the car. So I think that the biggest data point that they're going to be working on as far as the timeline is that Tesla and all the data that's in that computer.
I know that voice. That is John Day's pup saying hello.
Not mine. He's out for a hike.
Oh,
I wish.
Someone's pup is saying hello.
Those are my Goldens. Sorry.
Oh, no, we're dog friendly, man. We love dogs here. Chewy, get on it and start sponsoring us right now. So Nina, to you, how frustrating is it for you? Is it when a lead suspect potentially is just not cooperating? Do you just have to let it go, or do you sit there and try to smack them around a little bit? What do you do?
I mean, it's frustrating, but I think it's also in time reveals so much to us as investigators and behavior. And if this is how you're behaving, then, eventually we will work out why you're behaving like this. And I think, when you mentioned about if there's a second suspect, what that implication will have to the first suspect, because is he or she talking? How does that make you feel? And it's really hard to keep quiet, to be honest. When you go into an interview room and somebody just keeps quiet, we have interview techniques that will make people talk or try to make people talk, and it's really difficult to keep quiet. So I think their frustration is going to be higher than ours, and the desire, whether that's to say you're innocent or whether to correct something that's being said about you, because we're human. We've got to just use that time and let that person play out. There's plenty of other stuff going on, and hopefully when eventually we get that person in that room and we're not going to let them go home again, we've got all of our ducks in a row, and that may be English, but we've got everything ready to throw at them. And that's why I get frustrated, Joel, because the media saying things, and sometimes important things, because that tiny little bit of evidence may be the thing that makes us know we've got the right person in the room. And that can be so flawed by the media. And LAPD, who I will vouch is the second best in the world. But they're doing everything that they need to do. And I hope that the media calms down, lets them do their job, and lets time play out with our suspects.
And Nina didn't mean that NYPD is number one. I have a feeling she's talking about London there. So
I'm telling you, the British Bobby, we don't get what we deserve just because you like Hollywood movies.
You know what? I love British detective shows. They're my favorite. I scour those on Netflix. I don't know why.
I love police all around the world.
Colin, back to you for a minute. You're the FBI guy. Can the Tesla's data be completely deleted? I would assume not, because you just said it's a computer, and I feel like digital forensics guys can always get stuff off of computers. But is this the kind of thing where they could potentially call in some help from the FBI on the digital forensics side here? Because you guys seem to be more advanced, and that's not a slight against LAPD. It just seems like you guys have the very best when it comes to this sort of thing.
Well, I think in this case, they're going to call in engineers from Tesla. And that's what the FBI would do. They're going to bring in the engineers, and they're going to make sure nothing is left, because there's actual Tesla offers law enforcement ways of scraping that information off the cars. And generally, you do have to interact with the Tesla engineers to do that. But to answer the question, no, you're not going to be able to delete that data unless you're Elon Musk himself, or you're one of the engineers that designed the operating system. So that data is there, and it's going to be a wealth of information that's going to assist in bringing justice for this young lady.
That is fascinating. So they're bringing in like the Uber nerds who actually like build the Teslas to help deconstruct this. Just two more questions, and we'll get some final thoughts. John Day, as I don't want to use this word in a pejorative sense, but as a criminal defense attorney, do you exploit this undetermined cause of death? Do you get up there if it's never able to be determined? Do you say, hey, if this was never able to be determined, how dare you say that my client, murdered this young child. She died, on her own accord.
Yeah, those are some good points. I mean, at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. I mean, if they can't determine a cause of death, if they don't have any evidence that this was a homicide, I mean, again, it gets back to, was it an accidental death and somebody panicked and made some stupid decisions, or was it something else, something more sinister? And we don't know. And eventually we will have more information. We don't know what's going on with the medical investigator. We don't know what's going on with the rest of the investigation by LAPD. And so you wait it out. You wait to get information just like everybody else is. But, it gets back again to something. Yeah, I am a criminal defense lawyer, was a prosecutor. I'm a father. Something Nina said, this young girl, people knew she was there. They saw her with older, men, apparently. And nobody did anything. I mean, that's the thing that still gets me. It doesn't matter what job you have in this situation, in this criminal justice world. There's this young kid in the adult world, and who stopped it?
Yeah. Here's an interesting question with no real answer. Why is the media not held accountable? It must be extremely frustrating to law enforcement and the judicial system. There's a First Amendment in this country. I can only say that you hope that the media is trying to get it right and is either being given, inaccurate information, and they're not doing any of this intentionally. I see people really ripping on TMZ, which I can't blame you. They get a lot of things. They break a lot of news. They do get a lot of things wrong. They break a lot of things, but you just hope that they're not doing it with malice or ill intent, and that they're trying to get the story right. But should the media be held more accountable? I think the media gets destroyed pretty regularly in this country from just about everyone, and they should be held in check. So that's a good point as well. Troy Looney, before final thoughts, just to piggyback on what I asked John Day about, from an investigator standpoint, if there is never a way to determine manner and cause of death, how do you build a homicide case if that's what you believe it is?
So again, we work cases in the capacity of looking at everything from day one. So we wouldn't never assume, oh, this is potentially unaliving or by suicide or what have you, and miss details. It's all about the details, being meticulous, and sometimes even going back to talk to witnesses again, or talk to potentially suspects or people of interest, gathering new data, additional data. So no, you just, again, back to looking at the timeline, looking at the evidence as it comes in, new evidence potentially, new witnesses, new social media platforms or other platforms unknown previously that we just weren't aware of, right? So it's really how we just put the case together, and it can be all circumstantial. That is a huge factor with the determination and cause, but that is not the only thing we would ever rely on. We rely on everything, and then as people come forward or additional facts are shared or discovered, we put that into the piece of the puzzle, see how it fits in.
So we've got a new best guest. I hope Colin Schmidt will come back, retired FBI special agent out of the LA field office. Thanks for being here, Colin. What do you think is next for this investigation? And does this eventually get solved? And will an arrest or arrests be made?
Yes, and yes. There's going to be arrests. There's going to be people being held accountable. Just starting with the fact that she was a child and with an adult, and if there was a physical relationship there, I mean, this young man has got a lot of problems. There's going to, in terms of the next steps, LAPD is still gathering information. They're still interviewing as many people as possible. They're still taking tips. They're going to make sure they have a complete package before they present this to the district attorney's office. And the Emmy report is going to be a real crucial piece of the puzzle here.
Yeah. Retired UK homicide and other detective, Nina Hobson. She is a certifiable badass, and I'm hoping to meet up with her when I am in Los Angeles this coming week, heading out there tomorrow for a little family vacay. Just a reminder, we're going to have an episode drop later tonight on Anna Kepner. There's some developments. She is the 18-year-old who died and some people say, and now it is actually being officially called a homicide. So we're updating it with that new information tonight. Look for that under the video tab, where we have a lot of other video tabs. But throughout the week, we're going to have shows. We have one more live show, by the way, tomorrow. Drina Bernhardt is coming back. We're talking Donna Adelson in prison. She is here along with two other female former inmates. We're going to talk about Donna's new life in prison, and Drina will be here to address any questions. She was Donna Adelson's jailhouse daughter. A lot of people met her on the show. And again, she will be here tomorrow, special time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And then look out for shows. Dick Harpootlian of Alec Murdoch fame will be here. I put together a really interesting panel, including Steve Cohen. It'll drop Friday on what makes an amazing true crime show from a producer perspective, and other interesting programs, including Ruth Markel talking about why she is thankful this Thanksgiving. Nina Hobson, we're thankful for you. Where does this go next, do you think?
I think we're going to see that the suspect becomes an official suspect. They're going to be working really hard on him. And then once that happens, we're going to find out more. But until that happens, we're probably taking our foot off the pedal a little bit from the media point of view, or letting the media have things. And I just want to say at this point that I do like the media, but I believe that there's a time and a place. And I don't like the media when it's just making sensational stories, when at the heart of this is a young girl who we need to have justice for. And the way that we're going to do that is by us all playing by the rules, and letting the police, the FBI, the attorneys, everyone do their job, and let's get justice for this young child.
Well said. Young child, underscore that. John Day, criminal defense attorney out of the Santa Fe, New Mexico area, joining us once again. John, we appreciate it. If you're David's defense attorney, other than eating turkey this Thanksgiving, what are you doing with him and to help defend your client?
You're gathering information. You're keeping things on a lockdown. You're trying to learn everything you can about what's going on. You're hoping that your client is telling you everything that they know, so that you can be an effective advocate for your client, even in a situation that's got horrible facts like this one. But again, we still don't know a lot about this, and it may ultimately, tragically, there may not be a lot to come out of it, just to give everybody the sense of resolution and closure that they want. It's certainly possible that this was one of two things, either the tragic accident or an intentional homicide. But either way, it's a little too soon to know, and it's going to be a rough Thanksgiving for a lot of people involved in this case.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Dr. Detective Troy Looney, still active at the Akron, Ohio PD, not for that much longer. Dr. Detective, your final thoughts on this? You know, there was a time when I think it was more of a whodunit. It seems like it's now more of a why'd you do it and who exactly did it. But it does appear that David is a prime suspect, as well as potentially someone else. Where does this go from here?
So again, first and foremost, justice for Celeste and the family. And I can say that 2 or 3 times, right? It's all about getting justice for her. Where I think this is going is, the fact that they've mentioned second suspect, that's giving that person a chance to live with that, think about it, and potentially come forward. So either they come forward or the hammer comes down for everyone involved. So that, I believe we're going to see some information, new information, or breaking details within the next 2 weeks. So
yeah, interesting. John Day, real quick on that, because that just got me thinking. Is it possible that the LAPD is leaning on this second suspect and maybe have them kind of flip on David for some sort of deal? And if you're David's attorney, isn't that concerning for you?
Sure. Yeah. And that's certainly a possibility. That's very effective. And so that's why you're hoping that your client hypothetically in this kind of a situation is telling you everything that they know so that you can effectively, represent them and get an outcome for them. But it's it's tough to be on this side of a case, especially that's that horrible and horrifying and has such a sweet innocent victim. So as I said, that's something that certainly is on your mind, is what information is out there and who is flipping, who is working for a better deal against your client.
There you go. Best guest in true crime, but we've got a better community. I always say that. It's hanging on my wall behind me. We're back tomorrow, 12:30, the last live show before Thanksgiving, and then we'll have programming every day. Again, as I said off the top, not everyone loves the holidays. People get lonely, but STS is here, and you'll have brand new shows every day of the week this week, except for Saturday, Sunday. And then Monday, while we're heading back to Miami, there will be live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Brian Walsh case, who is going on trial in the murder of his wife, Anna Walsh, 39. They've got 3 young kids, and it is a horrible tragedy all the way around. But for now, justice for Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Guests, stick around for 1 second. Love you, America. Love you, Los Angeles. Love you, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Akron, Ohio. And, of course, my home state, New Jersey.